Hello, and welcome to this brand new side series of the Prog Connection. We are your hosts, Zoltan Vamus of the Prog Connection, and Bryan Vamus John Lance. How is everyone doing?
Good.
In this side series, we are going to be taking a look at album reviews specifically. We have already covered The Box, Laorla, and of course, we have also covered Drifting Sun's Veil, which we both gave a review of on the main series. We have decided to turn it into its own series, and we are starting with my pick, as Dad and John have already had their picks. I am going with IQ's album from 1993, Ever. And this album is the return album of original singer Peter Nichols, and he left the band after the Wake. Apparently there were conflicts in the band, and eventually it became to the point where if he didn't leave, someone else would, so he did. They got Paul Menel of Ark, and then they recorded the two albums. He rejoined the band around 93, and then they recorded Ever, and such is history. So we are going to be talking about Ever. It is, I would say, the album that solidified their return into the progressive rock scene, but also neo-prog scene, while remaining new in the same way. So, without further ado, I think we should start with Dad's opinion. What do we think, Dad, of IQ's Ever?
Well, up until we started to do this review a few days ago, I hadn't heard this album in many years. And I remember when it came out that I absolutely loved it. Thought it was fantastic. And on re-listen, I'm not quite as much in love with it as I was when it came out. I think it's good.
Mm-hmm.
And I give you my rating off the top, which is 7 out of 10, I guess.
Hmm.
But I don't think it's one of their best albums. I think it's kind of one of the weaker ones. I think it's kind of suffers from sort of not really focused songwriting. Kind of, so some of the bits and some of the melodies wander. I mean, if you really sat down and had reworked these melodies, you might have come up with something a little bit better, even without changing the chord structures. But I do think it's not their best effort. And the return of Peter Nichols, like, I don't know, when I must have been aware when I bought the album that he had returned, but I didn't have any of the earlier albums with him on, so I really had no reference and no expectation. And is it Paul Menel that was in the band before that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
Before
I
his
mean,
return, yeah.
I liked his singing.
Yep.
And I think the album before this, Are You Sitting Comfortably, is definitely a stronger album. It's more focused. The songwriting is focused, and they're really concentrated on the craft of songwriting. And I think it's a bit more of it really sounds like what IQ, I think, set out to do.
Mm-hmm.
It really does sound like, the sort of that Genesis type of spirit, but not totally losing track of the later 70s and early 80s Genesis sound. And so I think that in some ways they were very effective in the Paul Menel era of doing, like, there's some criticism that the Paul Menel era albums were very commercial. But I don't really think they really had any charting singles from the Paul Menel era, so I really don't think it really had any commercial impact at all. Nobody in the mainstream audience bought IQ when Paul Menel was singing. It was the same proggy crowd that had bought it bought IQ albums when Peter Nichols was in before, so probably no one was disappointed when Peter Nichols returned. His voice is fine, and I certainly do like him on the more recent IQ albums, and he sings fine on this album. It's more like, to me, it's just the melodies are not don't really grip you as much as the more recent IQ albums. And I do think that some of the keyboards now sound a little dated. And by dated, I don't mean like 1972, because I think that's what, there are some good mellotrons on this album, which I like, and which is great because that's sort of the retro prog idea that I think that they were trying to accomplish, and that's there. But I think some of the 90s synth sound very dated now. They're quite they could be done better now. So yeah, so I think that the album sounds like very much a product of its time. But for a 90s prog album when there was very little else that was really going on, I think it's you know, it's a pretty good album. And again, not as good as I remember, but still it's good. And solid 7 out of 10.
All right.
Yeah.
I want to touch on something before we get on to John, your point. When it comes down to the Paul Menel era, I do actually agree with you. I would maybe say Nomzamo is a little bit more poppy and has a lot more accessible tracks on it. Some of them working to good success. For example, Promises, As the Days Go By, that one's good. But there are other songs on that album that, me personally, I would say is some of the band's weaker material that they've written as a band in their last 40 years.
Well, I don't know what their situation was with a recording contract,
No,
but
yeah.
it may be that they were trying to either get a better record deal or
Yeah.
get a major label deal.
Well,
Maybe they were independent at the
Yeah.
time. So it certainly sounds like in that era they were trying to write a few songs that would perhaps get them that major deal and a major, a hit in the charts.
Yeah.
I don't think they were successful at it.
No.
And I would say that they probably weren't successful because most of the two albums with Paul Menel on it are still pretty far into the progressive rock world. They're not going to be. They were never going far enough into the pop world to be a mainstream band.
I would argue
So
that is true. But
if they were trying to be successful in the mainstream, they basically shot themselves in the foot because they weren't not going mainstream. They were not going mainstream enough. It's still sounding like on Nomzamo and Are You Sitting Comfortably, they still sound like a prog band to me.
I think if you listen to Nomzamo all the way through versus Are You Sitting Comfortably all the way through, you'd say it differently. You definitely would. They are different albums. Nomzamo definitely is the poppier album, and it's very clear. Are You Sitting Comfortably is definitely, it has the Terry Brown production. It sounds good, but it also has the 80s keyboards. However, I would say the proggier tracks outnumber the pop songs on that album more than on Nomzamo. Whereas Nomzamo has a couple of proggy songs, and then it's mostly attempting at being pop rock, from what I've heard. You walk the line between what was recorded already and what was being recorded. And Ever was definitely the product of the more proggier stuff on Are You Sitting Comfortably. But I would say that they definitely reverted back to the Peter Nichols sound once he rejoined the band. Paul Menel had a little bit more flying, high tone voice, whereas Peter Nichols doesn't. And they utilized that more on Nomzamo, whereas I think Are You Sitting Comfortably was more of a collection of IQ songs. Ever, on the other hand, is just an it's them picking up where they left off with Peter Nichols, I think. So, with that, I'm going to let John take the stand and go ahead.
All right. Well, IQ Ever, 1993. Um, okay, so we're gonna first start off, and before I get into the scores by song, the overall rating, and then there's a
Mm-hmm.
curveball here. I've heard the remix version,
Mm-hmm.
and I heard the live version all the way through final. But I just, based on the score, I had to substitute a song. Anyhow, I think that the keyboards on this album are not that good for 1993. The sound, Rod's Peter Nichols vocals for the most part on this album. Not a big fan of the rhythm section is good on this album. So when you get to the instrumental breaks, it's actually the best part of the album. But when the keyboards come in, they're over Peter's vocals, which is a major turnoff for me, big time. Now the live version, it doesn't have Martin Orford on any of that, and the whole live version, in my eyes, I'm not a big fan of live albums. So the live version that's on the remix, if I had to rate that overall, it'd be really high because it doesn't even sound nothing like the keyboards from 1993. The live versions, they should have just recorded the thing live and been done with it with when Martin Orford left the band. I'm not really a big fan of anything pre Seventh House. I'm a little stern on that, but here we go. Of course. The Darkest Hour, I give an 8 out of 10. Um, like I said, the rhythm section is really good. The instrumental break, awesome. Don't like the keyboards. Track 2, Fading Senses, is a 5 out of 10. It's too much of a softy, ballady. Out of Nowhere, track 3 is probably my favorite song um, on the album, other than Leap of Faith, but I get that an 8 out of 10. Really good. Probably the vocals all throughout rhythm section. The Epic Further Away, I originally gave like a 2 out of 10, but we bumped it up with a 5 due to I substituted the live version. I like the live version of this the song better than I like the studio version.
Mm-hmm.
Period. The live version of the Epic is good, but it did not get a lot of points because the keyboards on that song with Martin Orford, ugh, God, it's just the synth sounds that they're used on. So it's like God.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Further Away, okay, that's already the Epic. Leap of Faith, I gave a 9 out of 10. This is probably the best song on the album. Period. That is start to finish, the vocals, the lyrics, the rhythm section, the instrumental break, all of it. If I had to choose one song out of this album, if I could hear out of the 6 that are on here, it'd probably be this one that I would add to a heavy rotation. Um, Came Down is like kind of like a ballad, but it gets heavy near the middle, but it starts off slow. Probably the better song at it. And then there's a bonus track, Lost in Paradise, which is an 8 out of 10. So based on how Zoltan reviews tallies up the score, it's 50 out of 75 points. 65% studio only with the bonus track. 65% we rounded up to a 7 out of 10. Without the bonus track, to 6 out of 10. And overall to 76% with the live epic substituted. So without the bonus track, with the studio version, this album would be 6 out of 10 without the bonus track, 7 out of 10 with the bonus track, and 8 out of 10 with the live version. So overall, if I prefer the live version of this album over the studio version, period. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Would I want to own this album? No. Would I want to own the live version of this just to spend $20 to have it on the live version? Not really, because it's expensive. But if I had to buy it, I would only listen to the live version. And I'm not really big keen on the album. So this one for me is stream it, listen to it once or twice, and you're done with it. Never hear it again, type of thing. Whereas in the song "Leap of Faith" is about the only saving thing off of it. Like I said, we're reviewing this overall. The live version is the best out of all of it. Studio, not really a big fan of it. So
All
I
right.
think I got that across.
But I think with Ever again, this album I do really enjoy it. I do have the big version here, the 3-discer here.
When it comes with a DVD too.
Yep, it does. It comes with the DVD. Yeah.
Now I might get it as a live version because
Really nice
I should have
version of
probably
it.
watched the video. I didn't have
It's
time
really
to
good.
watch the video.
It's good. It's very good. It does help immerse. I also think that the way that they play it live, where they do Fading Senses, and then Leap of Faith came down, and then further away out of nowhere to end, instead of ending with Leap of Faith and came down, is cool.
Is the DVD the same show as
Yep.
the live CD?
Yes,
Okay,
it is.
I'm just making sure that they're not. You know how the word live is a separate show where it's DVD sometimes.
You just get the really good video. It's really good video.
Okay.
So I did rate each song. I did think that Darkest Hour was an 8. I do think that the keyboards there are very good. There's some really good retro mellotrons on that song. It does have a tendency to have a little bit of a meandering here and there, but I think overall the melodies found on this song are very good. So yeah, an 8 out of 10 from me. Fading Senses I also gave an 8. I thought that was a fairly decent song. I liked the last half a little bit better. But generally speaking, I think that the first half is also really nice. It is a 2-parter song, which is interesting. Out of nowhere, very much sounding like 80s Genesis to me. Very good keyboards, good guitar sounds, I think. Well, maybe not keyboards, but good enough that they're not bothering me too much. And I think that Martin Orford's textures are good, but generally the song is good, catchy, good tune, great guitar chords too. Further Away. Now, I did rate the studio version a 10 out of 15. I don't know how much I want to generally consider this to be one of the strongest IQ epics released on studio, because it's not. It's got really strong sections. I think that is one of Martin Orford's better keyboard solos that he's ever performed with in IQ with. And I thought that there were some really good keyboards in it, generally speaking. Also, the tone of the song, very good. I think it's just not the strongest epic that they've had over the last 30 years, 31 years since its release. Leap of Faith, I thought was very good. Very, again, Genesis-y with a little bit of that classic IQ touch. Also sounding very Cinema Show in the end, a little bit. Very good. It transitions into Came Down very nicely, which to me feels like an afterglow, like Wind and Wuthering type way to end the album, with a nice, gentle, somber, more ballad-like song with a little bit more, with a prog edge, which was what Afterglow was on Wind and Wuthering to me. So I gave Leap of Faith and Came Down both 9 out of 10. Lost in Paradise, I found it to be okay. I like the what they were able to do on that, and I find that them using the audio of Darkest Hour, the vocals isn't cool. 7 out of 10 for that. Uh, for the live version, I basically gave every song an identical rating, except for Further Away. I think the keyboard sounds on it are a little bit better, and I think Out of Nowhere on the live version is better as well. So my rating went up just a little bit, but virtually the score is identical to what it was. I rated the studio a total of 52 out of 65 for 80%, so I gave it an 8 out of 10. And I gave the live version a 54 out of 65, so an 83%.
How did you get 65? I got 75. I must have been a typo you did.
Hmm?
Yeah, because I have 50 out of 75 points, and you said 65. And that including the bonus track or without the bonus track?
Oh, mine is without the bonus track.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
I knew that if I did include the bonus track, it would take down my rating a little bit, and it would go down to like 78 or 79%, but it would still be rounded up to 8 out of 10 anyway. But generally, I would say that yeah, the live version is better. I do think that the studio listing is the way to listen to this album. However, I think that the live versions are better than the studio. I think that
I agree.
I think that the production that they were able to come up with on this album is good for the time. The original mix sounding at least adequate. I think that this mix makes the album a lot better. The original mix I would probably give about a 7 out of 10. It's not. It definitely doesn't help. But generally, I think that the return of Peter Nichols was the welcome choice. He fit like a glove back in the band, and it only set the tone for what the band would end up becoming. Subterranea, Seventh House, Dark Matter, and then to Frequency, Road of Bones, Resistance. It's been a very clear road since he's returned, ever being the starting point for the evolution that we've seen today. Now that they're coming out with a new album probably this year or next, I am extraordinarily excited to see what they do with that. They've only gotten better in my opinion. I do think that this is one of their stronger releases, but if I were to go back and watch my IQ worst to best, I probably wouldn't put ever where I did now. Probably putting it in the middle of the road again. I love this album. I think it's great. I just don't know if it's as good as I thought it was about 4 years ago. And that's my thoughts. Everyone else? Any closing
Yeah,
thoughts?
good. Yeah, they get better with each album. I think with Seventh House, they just got better and better and better and better.
Mm-hmm.
That's-
Dad?
I think the again, that most likely the mellotron sounds you hear, the choir and stuff, are done with digital sampling, which I think
Yeah.
was fairly new at that time. I mean, when we were doing Benjamin's Kite album in 1991 at Metalworks in Mississauga, Terry Brown was producing, and he had just come off of doing Are You Sitting Comfortably?
Yeah.
And, the songs, he knew that we were, doing sort of a neo-progressive rock kind of sound.
Right.
And he knew of a person who was a keyboard player who understood all of the digital sampling stuff. And so the guy was hired on my behalf, which was wonderful, and came into the studio with like a guitar case with all these little floppy disks were big back then, with all the different digital samples. And so on our 1991 album, you can hear a sample of a mellotron, but it's the string sounds, and we use it in at the breaking point. And on a Raging Sea, there's a sample of Ian Anderson's flute, which was a very prominent part of that song. So I imagine that Martin Orford was well versed in that digital sampling technology. And he may have been able to just, buy a sample of a mellotron and not actually needed to have a mellotron to put those sounds on the album, which is fine. That's the way you do it nowadays. I mean, the keyboards I have now, the Korg Chrome and the what is it, the Phantom here, the Roland Phantom, they have pretty good samples of mellotrons.
Yeah.
So they're available on pretty much any keyboard nowadays. You don't need
Right.
to own an analog mellotron anymore to get those sounds.
Yeah, that's true.
So, that's what again, I mean, it sounds really good actually on this album.
That's another thing I've always wondered because the original Mellotron, what I've been told, is it's ran on a tape,
Yes, it
so
is.
you'll never get the
No.
same sound twice based on how you
No.
press it. So with the digital version, is it replicating the original, or can you just hold the key forever and it does whatever? That's what I'm wondering.
Well, most of the samples that you see on like my Korg keyboards, so synths today's, have ones that go on this note is sustained for as long as you want. However, I also have a digital mellotron built by Mellotron and was sent to me. I bought it from a company in Sweden. And that mellotron, even though it's digital, it's been purposefully manipulated such that the note does run out after 8 seconds.
Nice.
Right. And you can hear that very clearly on the very end of our 2018 album Antediluvian Euphonies, where at the very end of the album, I hold a sustained chord on choirs on the mellotron, and I just hold it until it fades away, and the note just stops, and then it just fades into the distance, so you can hear it. If you just listen to our 2018 album, you can hear it. So because it is great to hear the note actually just stop after 8 seconds. That's cool.
Yeah.
So what people did when they had a real mellotron was that they made sure that the chords they were playing didn't last longer than 8 seconds. Right? So if you're listening to choirs on Trick of the Tail or whatever, I'm sure none of them last longer than 8 seconds. So they knew that they only had 8 seconds to hold a chord.
Yeah. Makes sense.
So, but I don't think any of the choirs that I heard on ever lasted more than 8 seconds, so I don't think you ran into that problem.
No. That's true. John, did you have something else you wanted to say?
I'm good.
I think, generally speaking, this is a very, if you want to get into IQ, I think that this is a good starting point. It does have...
It's a good starting point because it's
classic.
very indicative. It sounds like them. It sounds, it's representative of what they sound like.
Yes,
and you'll know that there's better albums out there.
Yeah, it's very easy to get into. It's got some of their more bass and more level entry epics on here. I would say Further Away being a little bit more entry level. Same with Darkest Hour becoming nearing the 12-minute mark on this album. I would also say that when it comes down to it, the shorter length of this album, not even being an hour long, very classic length for a progressive rock album of the time, also really solidifies its ground as being a very accessible and very easy to pick up IQ album. But I don't think I can say that it's one of the ones that you should be listening to as your favorite.
Yeah, if someone doesn't have an IQ album and wants to know what they sound like,
yeah,
I think
this is a good starting point.
It's okay, but I would recommend maybe Dark Matter's a
Dark
really
Matter,
good place.
yeah, because that one's more indicative of what they sound like now and sounds more modern to their what they sound like. This one definitely is a lot less heavy. It's a lot more atmosphere based. It's a little more meandering. It's not as focused and concise as the new ones. And
got a little bit too much of a 90s sound to it.
that, and it's very just neo-prog. It's very just where they picked up where they left off when Peter Nichols left. That's what it is, in my opinion. I think that makes sense. Anything else, guys?
No, I'm good.
All right.
Peace.
I think that leaves us off with just saying goodbye. So if you guys like this new series, we're going to be doing it more. We're going to do the Chronicles of Father Robin trilogy. That is going to be coming soon. Thank you for John for the suggestion. We're going to be listening to those very intently soon. So without further ado, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, share, and subscribe. And as always, we'll see you later. All right. Peace.
Bye.